Thank you for listening to the Limitless Spirit Podcast. This is the conversation about faith, hope, and the impact we're designed to make as Christians on the world around us. Your host, Helen Todd, the Vice President of World Missions Alliance, has spent over 2 decades traveling to the world's hotspots to meet the spiritual and physical needs of those who are desperate. She interviews guests from different walks of life whose stories, books, and ideas examine today's most pressing issues and challenges of being a Christian today and inspire you to action.
I didn't get to do my first missions trip until I was 26. Just kind of kept saying, I don't know how I can afford it. I have school debt and all my own bills. And I had this thought come to my mind that was, you get to go on the missions trip. Memories came up of, I can cry about it thinking now, a desire to go on a mission trip in high school, and I didn't get to go. The Lord just put his finger right on a desire, and he said, I know you wanted to go on the mission trip, and I have plans for you to go a lot. That was another experience of realizing how much the Lord knows me personally, loves me personally, and knows the desires of my heart.
You just heard Katie Hagstrom sharing a very emotional moment from her youth. Katie came to know Jesus during a rough moment in her life after her parents got divorced and she was separated from her mom as a very young girl. And although she became a Christian at the age of 10, as a teenager, she was sarcastic and unloving towards others, and God had to gently change her from inside out. Then later on, she had a true revelation of being known and loved by God, which in return prompted Katie to reach out to 2 young women on the mission field in a very special way. What a great reminder that changed lives change lives. This is our new series on the Limitless Spirit podcast, and we're about to hear how that's true for Katie Hagstrom right now. Good morning, Katie. It's great to have you on the podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm well. Good morning. Hi, Helen. It's a beautiful sunny day in Rochester, New York.
Well, on the contrary, it's dreary and rainy in Branson, Missouri, and it's supposed to stay like this for 5 days.
Oh, we must be on the other side. We're supposed to have 70 and sunny for 5 days, which is rare for us.
So we're on the opposite ends of the spectrum. And I say on days like this, I like to remind the Lord that he promised no more flood.
Because look for the rainbow.
Sometimes it feels like he has forgotten. No, of course, I'm joking. I have to make that very clear. I'm just kidding. Just kidding.
Yeah. That's good.
Well, you have a very interesting job today. In addition to many hats that you wear within your church and your community as well, you work for a coffee company, fairly new company. Is that correct?
New maybe in terms of roasting. It's a roastery in Rochester, New York, and I'm the wholesale director. So I help sell our coffee to accounts like hotels and restaurants to use our coffee. So yeah, it's a very good, fun job. I get to drink a lot of coffee.
Well, and as a big coffee fan myself, I just always remember you sent me a particular bag from your company that I felt was the best coffee I've ever tried. And so does your company purchase coffees from different countries or one particular country?
Nope, from different countries. Colombia, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Guatemala. And we have been very purposeful to develop direct trade relationships with our farmers at origin so that we get to purchase their harvests and do so year after year. So then the farmers can count on our purchases and they can invest in improvements and they don't have to kind of ride the waves of the commodities market, which can be a little bit hard because prices rise and fall easily.
Very true. Remind me the name of the company. I should have mentioned this first.
Yeah, it's Joe Bean Roasters. So you could, I mean to do a sales plug, but you could check out joebeanroasters.com for coffee. And we have all the stories. Any of the coffees, we'll put the story connected to the farmers. So that's pretty fun.
Well, and I think it's really cool because it complements your passion, your other passion, and that is for missions. And so I think that it's interesting how God put you in this position, knowing that you specifically have a heart for missions and are very involved in the missions department in your church, which is how we connected essentially. Well, I am excited to talk about the beginning of your story, which I just found out recently, and I find it very interesting because we're pursuing our new series on this podcast, and the series are called Change Lives, Change Lives. And I think that every person that has invited Jesus into their life has experienced a change, and it's a different story, but it's nevertheless, there is the transformation that happens. And so I think your story is quite interesting. So you grew up in a Christian family, a family that was very active in the community and in the church. And so you've seen what Christian faith is like since early childhood. And yet in your early childhood, you have experienced something rather traumatic, which is your parents' divorce. So tell me what it felt like. You were a very young child at the time.
Yeah, I think I will say I'm a person who isn't great with details. So to me, everything is like about. So I think when they divorced when I was about 8 or 9, and leading up to that, there had been a lot of difficulties, fighting, and obviously you don't get divorced for no reason. There's difficulties that lead to it. So just stressful, just really stressful house. I think I can feel even sometimes today that the sort of stress and anxiety that rises up when there isn't peace, and wasn't peace in the household. And there came a time where they split, and for some different reasons. I was the oldest of 3 at the time. For some, there's some reasons we stayed with my dad primarily, and then my mom was kind of in town, and we would go back and forth, but stayed with him. It was very rocky. Those years were rocky and difficult.
And then your mom moved to California to be close to her parents. And I can only imagine how, for a young girl, that had to be pretty devastating to be so far away from your mom.
Yeah, I think that was definitely, it's sort of like you don't understand, you don't know what's going on. She battled some mental health and some different things. And so she went to be close to her parents. She was from California, and I think just had a hard time in Montana with weather and different things. But yeah, it was a little hard to understand. But I think also at the same time, I knew there were some things that she needed to get better. She needed to get well. I definitely felt safer with my dad. Like he was more stable. So it was probably twofold, hard, but also maybe bringing some stability. I don't know. Definitely rocky.
So it was during that time that your dad actually led you to the Lord. So how did that happen?
I just have this memory of, I think it was night when we were in the living room, and I think my siblings were there, and it seemed like he sort of was purposeful, I think, kind of having a time of prayer and reading the Bible, and then led us to the Lord. And I have a sister who's just a little less than 2 years, so she was there. My brother was younger. And I just remember kind of an invitation of him being more, we had grown up in the church and had a Christian family, but just being more specific to directly ask, would you like to ask Jesus into your heart? And saying yes, and wanting that personal relationship that he was describing. And yeah, I just remember that kind of being very special family time. And then really feeling like something happened on the inside. A peace came in. And it's hard to explain, but it just kind of happens. For people who know, they kind of know. Similar that when you say that yes, there's something that happens on the inside.
I think it's very beautiful that you were so young at the time. And, when I was a mother of little kids, which my kids are not so little anymore, they both accepted Jesus at a very young age, the oldest one at 3 and the youngest one at 5. And both times I felt, my goodness, they're still so young. Could this be like real? Because they did it upon their own initiative. And I almost questioned that at first, thinking, this is like too young. This is serious stuff. And yet your story confirms that there is no age that is too young, really, for a child, for a human being to have that experience. And you have that tangible confirmation that something changed in you at that moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And yet the impact of that childhood trauma that you have gone through had some consequences on your life, which became more apparent in your teenage years, which everything becomes more apparent in our teenage years. And so there was a moment when you realized that you really needed a transformation.
My dad got remarried, and a wonderful woman who, I say I have 2 moms. And I'm pretty sure it was when they were on their honeymoon, there was a young couple that stayed with us for the week. And I remember the young woman at some point saying to me, just pretty directly saying, "You're really sarcastic and it's unpleasant to be around, and kind of like you need to quit it." and I don't think I realized it. It's sort of like you don't see the plank in your own eye. And I remember being like really mad and sort of offended, like, "You've got a lot of nerve. I don't even hardly know you. How dare you tell me what's wrong with me?" But at the same time, it's sort of calling me out on something. And I started thinking, am I? Oh, I don't know. And realizing, in fact, my siblings, I think my sister had told me once that when I had spent time with a certain friend, she was like, "Whenever you come back, you're always meaner." And so I think I was kind of sarcastic and put people down and just kind of mean, and realized I was like, oh, I don't want to be like that. I didn't realize it was so noticeable. And really asking the Lord, journaling. I've always been a journaler, just kind of saying, well, if this is true, then I need you to help me. I don't know what to do. You've got to help me. It kind of started, a pondering process and a walking out with the Lord of, let me transform you. And the Lord's so gentle. He kind of lets us know you don't feel loved. And so you don't give out love. And kind of beginning that journey of starting to realize how much I need his love, and I need it to transform me in order for me to be able to give love.
And all that was happening all the while you were this perfect Christian girl attending church and probably being involved in all kinds of youth activities, thinking that you're doing everything right, and yet not realizing that on the inside you just needed a touch from Jesus. Is that a correct description then?
Yeah, I would say that. Still went to youth group and church and did the things that, Christian people do, but just didn't realize that I was kind of unhappy and I wasn't very nice to people. I don't know if I realized it, but kind of realizing, oh, I can be really sarcastic and put people down, and that's not nice. And you kind of don't realize until the Lord starts to show you, you're doing that because you don't feel loved and you're unhappy. And so you're trying to make other people feel happy. So, it's that transforming process that he does as we work out our salvation daily.
And it's beautiful because, clearly he had big plans for your life, and he wanted to point out the most important thing, which is without love, you can't really serve him in the way that he needs to be served. So he fixed the most important thing because he had big plans. And I love that part of the testimony when you realize that he truly loves you. So do you mind sharing it with our listeners?
Yeah, and I think partly it's a revelation as you go on. If you're in church a lot, you sort of have a lot of head knowledge and you know the things and the stories, but there are then experiences in your life that kind of bring you to these places of moving the head knowledge to the experience to your heart. And, for me, just kind of realize, those things where it says God is love, and he wants you to love, but you have to experience the love and the presence of God yourself and really hear yourself how much he loves you, how much he likes you. There were certain moments over the teenage years of really having things happen that is the Lord telling me, no, I love you. I chose you. I specifically want you, not because you go to church all the time or you do all the things you're supposed to do, but because I know you and I created you and I like the things about you, and it is very personal. It's not just the church things that you learn. It's personal to you.
And so what was that moment when you really heard that and experienced that?
There's kind of, how you think back in your life, there's like blips on the timeline. I guess as I'm thinking while I'm talking, some of them happened at youth retreats where I experienced that. I went to camp. My grandfather helped found Young Life in Billings. And I remember going to, the first time I went to a Young Life camp, Young Life very much reaches out to people who are not churched. And so the first time I went as a camper, but then I kind of realized, well, I'm kind of know this stuff. And they had these youth leaders, so you could work for camp and be a youth leader. And I wanted to come back as a youth leader and be able to share my testimony of that. And I guess specific events, I think it seems like it's little blips over time that you learn it. And it happened at retreats, and then it's happened in, I remember Young Life Camp, and then when I came back the second summer was really hard, and I really had to lean into the Lord, and that's where I very much specifically felt him telling me he loved me individually, but I didn't feel it. I had to really fight through it.
So somehow along the way, you developed interest in missions.
I think it's just in me, just to love all different kinds of people. And I didn't realize it, but I kind of tell a story of, so we would go to California to visit my mom for holidays and summers. And, in my early teen years, one of the summers, maybe early on, I remember riding the bus, and it was a packed bus and just so diverse with all different kinds of people. And I was recognizing that, kind of cluing in and sort of realizing where I come from, it isn't as diverse. I mean, there was Hispanic and Asian and just all different colors and kinds of people. And I just loved it and loved the people and kind of wanted to just hug everyone because I just wanted to say, you're so beautiful. And so I think the desire for missions came out of a recognition of seeing how many different kinds of people there are in the world and how beautiful they are for their cultural and ethnic uniqueness. Everybody so different. And it made me want to get to know them and know where they came from. And I remember a different experience of being on a ferry boat ride, talking with a woman. She was very friendly and saying she was from Cambodia. And I'd never heard of, I didn't know where that was. And just thinking, oh, I want to see where that is and what it must be like. Cause she was so, beautiful and unique. So the desire came with becoming aware of the uniqueness and diversity of people in the world.
But then you felt like it wasn't for you because it seemed like financially or time-wise, it was impossible for you to find the opportunity.
Yeah, I was involved with my youth group, and my youth group would typically do a summer missions trip, and I just never could. I always had a summer job. We would go to California for a couple months, and then when I got old enough to have a summer job, I would kind of do the job in the California trips would be a little shorter. I always had to have a job. My dad was good. It was good for me. Had to pay for my own car insurance. And, if I wanted it, I had to pay the bills. And it just never seemed possible for me. But I remember always being a little disappointed that I didn't get to go.
And so how did it happen that you went?
I didn't get to do my first missions trip until I was 26. By then, I had moved to Rochester, New York. I came here to do a Master of Social Work at Roberts Wesleyan. Got involved very quickly in what is my current church now, Bethel Christian Fellowship. As much as you can as a college student, I did a cell group and did some different things. I think, now I was out of college. They were preparing to do a mission trip to Scotland. And one of my friends that I'd been making friends with in the church, she decided to go. And it kind of, to be honest, probably sparked a little jealousy. Oh, you're going? I want to go. And so I kind of went to the information meeting to see, let me see what this is about. Could I go? And just kind of kept saying yes and exploring it and realizing I would like to do this. I don't know how I can afford it. I have school debt and all my own bills, but I have something stirring in me that I want to try. And they were very good. The good old lines about if it's God's will, it's God's bill. And so I start hearing these things about if the Lord is wanting you to go, step out in faith. And so I was kind of trying to do that and had signed up and was making the plans. We were doing some fundraisers and things like that, but still real stressed out about, is this okay? Can I afford this? I have so many bills. Maybe I shouldn't. I had this experience in church in worship. It was just in the worship time. And I had this thought come to my mind that was, you get to go on the missions trip. And, it was kind of the Lord. And I thought, yeah, I'm signed up for the missions trip. And then I heard it again, like emphatically, you get to go on the missions trip. And I mean, it like touched, we're in the middle of worship. It touched some core in me. And memories came up of a desire. I mean, I can cry about it thinking now of a desire to go on a mission trip in high school. And I didn't get to go. And it was like the Lord just put his finger right on a desire. And he said, I know you wanted to go on the mission trip and I want you to go on the mission trip. And not only that, I want you to go. I have plans for you to go a lot. And it just that was another experience of realizing how much the Lord knows me personally, loves me personally, and knows the desires of my heart very personally, right down to, these memories come up that I didn't realize. You just kind of push it aside and think, I don't, that would be a nice idea, but you kind of stuff it down and you don't know if I realized how much I wanted to go until the Lord was like, you really wanted to go. And I remember that and I'm going to send you. It was very special. That was a very special experience and went.
This is so beautiful, Katie, because I'm thinking as you're sharing this, that he didn't call you, unlike, many times when people feel the calling to go on a mission trip is because they want to serve God, they want to do something for God. And this great because, this is how we express our love for God. We want to proclaim him, we want to let other people know how good he is. But in your case, that was the moment when God showed you how much he loves you. He wasn't sending you on a mission trip because he needed your help. He was sending you because it was your cherished desire and he gave you something you really, really wanted.
Yeah, exactly. It was very special. And just this revelation of how deeply he knows me and how much he wants to fulfill the desires of my heart. And that in and of itself is a faith walk, because it's sort of like we can be really protective of this thing is really special and precious. And if he's not going to do it, that will be so disappointing. So I'm going to keep it locked away. And it was a revelation to me of even those secret locked away places he knows about. And he doesn't want to disappoint us. He doesn't want us to be disappointed or have hope deferred. He wants to fulfill those But there's a faith step in believing that he does and believing that he loves us so much, right down to the very core desires.
This is so good. This is just great. And actually, it was that first mission trip where you told me you felt like you connected with someone, and you felt like maybe because of your past, you were able to help them. So let's talk about this experience.
It was a mission trip to Scotland with Bethel, and it connected with an organization, a church in Scotland, and then an organization out of Norway called Jesus Revolution. Actually, that trip ended up being way harder than I expected. The leader of the trip put my friend and I, Christine and I, on Christine, which she's, you know her. We were making friends way back 16 years ago.
This is so cool. Christine was an amazing team member in Argentina. So very thankful for that introduction.
Yeah. So they put us as kind of leaders over half the team. And then it just was hard. Missions is awesome, but it's also hard. It can be harder. And usually because we're getting refined in the process.
Very true.
Because I was behind the scenes doing things that were not glamorous and not feeling like I was connecting with people. But kind of toward the end, I think it was both Christine and I connected with two young women from a church. They were from a very small church, and we went to Aberdeen, Scotland, and Aberdeen was very hard, just, kind of dark and hard to the gospel. And these were two young ladies who were very faithful. They were involved in, I think, an Assembly of God church, and just beautiful. And they were kindred. They were our age and loved the Lord. But when the culture all around doesn't have a desire for God and they want to do their own thing, and you're wanting to stay faithful to serving and loving the Lord, but, things are dark and kind of hard, we just connected just in encouraging them, just to say, you know what, the Lord sees you. He knows your city. He knows your nation. He sent us all here because he loved this city and this nation so much. And just to encourage them where they had been, I think, plowing in hard soil for a long time. And I think that was one of the things that excited me so much, partly because they were our age and kind of kindred, but also being able to say, actually, no, we want to be here to encourage you that he sees you, he sees your faithfulness, he hasn't forgotten you, and he wants to do a great thing for you, in you, through you, and for your city. And it was fun to get to encourage people where you knew that they needed it.
Well, and in a sense, I feel like it correlates with what God had just done for you by letting you know that he knows the deepest desires of your heart, even the ones that you have already pushed aside and given up on. And I think perhaps these young women also needed the similar kind of encouragement. So what he did was not just for you, but for these two women, plus many other people that you have touched since then, not only in the nations, but even in your own church and in your own community. And I had the privilege of serving with you in Israel and look forward to many more adventures together on the mission field.
Yeah, that would be great.
Katie, thank you so much for sharing your story. I think it's truly a beautiful illustration of how deeply and personally God loves us. And sometimes I find it mind-boggling that the creator of the universe, the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, all-powerful God, knows me by name, and even to the depths of my soul where I don't dare to reach myself.
Yeah, and even orchestrates our experiences and the stories of our life. He just is such a beautiful director, conductor, and all of the stories and the things we've gone through, he layers and brings us to use them, so that we can, be blessed to be a blessing.
Well, thank you so much again, Katie. And I am looking forward to many more adventures with you together on the mission field.
Yeah, me too. I'm looking forward to it. Thanks, Helen.
I have known Katie for a few years, but this is the first time I hear her story so intimately. I appreciate the wisdom that she shared near the end of the interview, that we are blessed by God to be a blessing to others. You know, it's a wonderful thing to be known and loved by God. And here at World Missions Alliance, we get the privilege to travel the world and share this message with the people from all walks of life. If your heart is being tugged towards missions, perhaps you too are ready to tell your story to someone else. It could be in your own neighborhood, or it could be in another country like it happened for Katie. If so, please check our website for more details. Our website is rfwma.org. As always, thank you so much for listening to this episode. I'm Helen Todd. Until next time.
Limitless Spirit is produced by World Missions Alliance. If you believe in the importance of the Great Commission, sharing Christ around the world and helping those in need, check out our website, rfwma.org. If you liked what you heard, consider supporting the Limitless Spirit podcast by going to rfwma.org/give. Subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform and leave us a review. Tune in next week for another exciting episode.